The dust rose in small clouds around Eleanor Voss's worn boots as she knelt beside her sister's bedside, counting the meager coins in her palm for the third time that morning, praying the count would somehow change. It did not. $3.17 lay between Rose and another week of hunger in their tiny rented room above the feed store in Murphy's, California, in the summer of 1883. Rose coughed again, that wet rattling sound that had become as familiar as breathing, and Eleanor pressed a damp cloth to her sister's fevered forehead with hands that trembled despite her best efforts to steady them. Rose was 16, too young to be this sick, too young to have lost their parents to cholera 2 years prior, too young for the hollow look that had settled into her cheeks. Eleanor, at 22, felt ancient. She had tried everything. The millinery shop had let her go when business slowed. The restaurant needed no more help. The laundry already had too many hands fighting over too little work. She had scrubbed floors, mended clothes, and done whatever honest work she could find. But Murphy's was a small mining town past its glory days, and opportunities were scarcer than rain in August. That morning, as dawn painted the Sierra Nevada foothills gold and rose, Eleanor had walked along Angel's Creek with an idea born of desperation. Wildflowers grew in abundance there, California poppies bright as coins, purple lupines tall and proud, white yarrow delicate as lace. She had no basket, so she used her shawl, filling it with the prettiest blooms she could find. Her plan was simple and probably foolish. She would stand on Main Street and sell them. A nickel each, maybe. Enough for bread and milk. Enough to make it through another day. The sun climbed higher as Eleanor arranged her flowers in old tin cans she had scrubbed clean. She positioned herself outside the general store where foot traffic was steadiest, though calling it traffic was generous. A few miners wandered past, barely glancing her way. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house gave her a pitying look that burned worse than contempt. Eleanor kept her chin up and her voice steady as she called out her wares, though each minute that passed without a sale felt like a small death. Flowers, fresh picked this morning, only 5 cents. The morning wore on. The sun grew hot. The flowers began to droop despite the water she had given them. Eleanor's stomach twisted with hunger she had grown used to ignoring. She was calculating how much longer she could stand there before she needed to return to Rose when she heard the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple horses moving at an easy pace down Main Street. She looked up, and her breath caught. 5 riders approached, cowboys from the look of them. But the man in the lead sat his horse like he owned not just the animal but the ground it walked on. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a dusty black hat, a blue shirt open at the collar, and an expression of easy confidence that spoke of a man who had never gone hungry a day in his life. The riders slowed as they neared the hitching posts outside the saloon. The lead man glanced her way, and Eleanor felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. She straightened her spine and lifted her chin, refusing to look away despite the way her heart hammered. "Flowers, sir, fresh picked, only 5 cents. He reined his horse to a stop, and the others followed suit. Up close, Eleanor could see he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 26 or 27, with sun-browned skin and lines around his eyes from squinting into bright distances. He studied her with an intensity that made her want to fidget, but she held still. "How many you got there?" His voice was deep, rough-edged but not unkind. "About 40 arrangements, sir." She gestured to the tin cans lined up beside her. He swung down from his saddle with the easy grace of a man who lived on horseback. The other riders remained mounted, watching with various degrees of curiosity and amusement. He walked over to examine her flowers, and Eleanor caught the scent of leather and sage and something else, something warm and masculine that made her skin prickle with awareness. "These are real pretty," he said, touching a poppy with surprising gentleness for such large hands. "You pick them yourself?" "Yes, sir, this morning along Angel's Creek." "You got a name?" "Eleanor Voss, Kade Lancaster." He looked at her directly then, and she saw kindness in his dark eyes along with a sharp intelligence. "I will take them all." For a moment, Eleanor was certain she had misheard. "Sir, all of them. That is 40 arrangements at 5 cents each, $2. He was already reaching into his pocket. $2, Eleanor repeated stupidly. Her mind raced. That was more than half what she needed for the week. It was a miracle. It was impossible. Kade pulled out several coins and counted them into her palm. His fingers were calloused and warm as they brushed her skin. "Actually, let us make it an even $5. Those are mighty fine flowers." Eleanor stared at the money in her hand. $5. 5 whole dollars. She could buy proper food for Rose, medicine from the doctor, pay part of their rent. She could breathe for a moment. Tears pricked her eyes and she blinked them back fiercely, but not before one escaped to track down her dusty cheek. "I do not understand," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Kade's expression softened. "Because you look like you need it, and I have got more money than I need flowers, though I am sure my sister will appreciate them. She has been after me to bring some life to the ranch house." "Your ranch," the double L. "About 5 miles northwest of town, biggest cattle operation in Calaveras County." He said it matter-of-factly, no boast in his tone. "We run about 2,000 head. Eleanor's eyes widened. She had heard of the Double L Ranch. Everyone in Murphy's had. It was the kind of success, story people whispered about. How Kade Lancaster had inherited a struggling homestead from his father and transformed it into an empire through sheer determination and smart business sense. He was only 27 years old and already owned more land than most men could walk across in a day. "Thank you," Eleanor said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "You have no idea what this means to me." Kade studied her for another long moment. "You out here selling flowers often?" "First time. I need the money for my sister. She is sick and there is not much work to be found." "What kind of work do you do?" Eleanor lifted one shoulder. "Whatever I can find. I can sew, clean, cook, keep books. I worked at the millinery until it closed." "I am strong and I am not afraid of hard work." One of the men still mounted called out, "Boss, we should get going if we want to make it back before dark." Kade held up a hand without looking away from Eleanor. "What if I hired you?" The world seemed to tilt slightly. "Sir, I need someone to manage the ranch house. My sister Lily does her best, but she is only 19 and would rather be out riding than dealing with domestic affairs. I need someone who can cook for the ranch hands, keep the house in order, manage supplies. It is a big operation and it needs proper oversight. I will pay you $20 a month plus room and board." $20 a month. Room and board. Eleanor's mind reeled. That was more money than she could make at 3 different jobs in town, and it included a place to live. But Rose, sweet Rose who needed her. "My sister," Eleanor started. "Bring her," Kade said immediately. "We have plenty of room and our doctor visits the ranch twice a month. He is a good man, studied back east. Maybe he can help her." Eleanor felt her knees go weak. She had been carrying the weight of their survival alone for so long that the offer felt like someone had lifted a boulder from her shoulders. But she had learned to be cautious. Men did not usually offer charity without expecting something in return. "Why?" she asked, meeting his eyes directly. "You do not know me. I could be a thief or worse." Kade smiled, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip. I am a pretty good judge of character, Miss Voss. Built my whole business on rating people right. You are standing out here in the heat selling wildflowers for nickels to take care of your sister. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. One of the mounted men, a lean cowboy with graying temples, spoke up. Kade is right, miss. We have been needing proper management at the house for ages. Would be good to have someone who knows what they are doing. Eleanor looked down at the coins in her hand, then back at Kade Lancaster's open, honest face. Every instinct she had developed over 2 hard years of survival told her this was real, that he meant what he said, that this was the break she had been praying for. "When would you want me to start?" she asked. "How about tomorrow? That will give you time to settle your affairs in town and pack your things. I will send a wagon for you and your sister. Where are you living?" "Above the feed store." Kade nodded. "I know the place. Wagon will be there at 8 in the morning. That work for you?" "Yes," Eleanor said, and then more firmly, "Yes, sir, thank you. I will not let you down." "I believe you." Kade tipped his hat to her. "Until tomorrow, then, Miss Voss." He gathered up the tin cans of flowers, distributed them among his men who accepted them with good-natured grumbling and teasing, and swung back into his saddle. Eleanor watched them ride down Main Street, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She looked down at the $5 in her hand and let herself believe, just for a moment, that things might actually get better. She ran all the way back to their room, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Rose was awake, sitting up in bed and looking worriedly toward the door. "Ellie, what happened? You are back so early." Eleanor knelt beside the bed and opened her palm, showing her sister the coins. "I sold them all, every single flower, and Rose, something wonderful has happened." She told her sister everything, the words tumbling out in a rush. Rose's eyes grew wider and wider until tears began to stream down her thin cheeks. "A ranch, with a doctor. Ellie, that is too good to be true." "I thought the same thing, but I believe him. I do not know why, but I trust Kade Lancaster. We are going to be all right, Rosie. For the first time in forever, we are going to be all right." That night, Eleanor packed their few belongings into 2 battered carpet bags. Everything they owned in the world fit easily. She bought beef stew from the restaurant and milk from the dairy, spending some of her precious dollars to give Rose a real meal. Her sister ate more than she had in weeks, and color returned to her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. They talked late into the night, whispering plans and hopes they had not dared voice in months. Rose would get better with proper food and medical care. Eleanor would work hard and prove herself invaluable. Maybe they would actually have a future beyond simply surviving day to day. Eleanor lay awake long after Rose had fallen asleep, listening to her sister's breathing and praying it would soon lose that terrible rattle. She thought about Kade Lancaster, the way he had looked at her with respect rather than pity, the way he had offered help without making her feel small. She thought about his hands, gentle on the flower petals, and the smile that had transformed his serious face. She thought about tomorrow and the strange new life that awaited them. When morning came, Eleanor was already dressed and waiting, their bags packed by the door. Rose sat in the room's only chair, wearing her best dress which hung loose on her thin frame. They heard the wagon before they saw it, the jangle of harnesses and the creak of wheels on the dusty street below. Eleanor looked out the window and saw a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses, with a young cowboy at the reins. He looked up and waved, his face friendly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. They made their way downstairs carefully, Rose leaning heavily on Eleanor's arm. The cowboy hopped down and doffed his hat. "Miss Voss, I am Tommy. Mr. Lancaster sent me to fetch you ladies." He had a slight accent, maybe Irish, and kind blue eyes. He looked at their meager bags and then at Rose's frail form, and his expression grew serious. "Let me help you up, miss. We have got blankets in the back to make you comfortable." Tommy proved as good as his word, arranging the wagon bed with blankets and even a pillow so Rose could lie down. He handled their bags with care and helped both women up with unfailing courtesy. As they rolled out of Murphy's, Eleanor looked back at the town that had been both prison and home for 2 years. She felt no nostalgia, only a fierce hope that she would never be that desperate again. The ride to the Double L took about an hour and a half. The landscape changed as they left town, opening up into rolling hills golden with summer grass. Oak trees dotted the hillsides, their shadows dark pools beneath them. In the distance, the Sierra Nevada rose blue and majestic against the sky. Cattle grazed in fields so vast Eleanor could not see their end. Fences ran straight and true, posts sturdy and well-maintained. Everything spoke of prosperity and careful management. They turned under an arch bearing the ranch's brand. 2 interlocked etiquettes burned into a sign that spanned the road. The main house came into view and Eleanor caught her breath. It was 2 stories tall, built of honey-colored wood with a wraparound porch and real glass windows. Flower beds flanked the front steps, though the plants looked neglected. Several outbuildings spread out behind the main house, including a large bunkhouse, a barn that could hold dozens of horses, and various sheds and storage buildings. Cowboys moved about their business, mending tack, working horses in a round pen, hauling supplies. Several looked up with curiosity as the wagon approached, but they kept working. This was a place where people took their jobs seriously. Kade emerged from the house as Tommy pulled the wagon to a stop. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his shirt fresh and his hair still damp from washing. He moved to help Rose down with surprising gentleness for such a large man. "Miss Rose, welcome to the Double L. Let us get you inside and settled. Miss Eleanor, your sister can have the room at the back of the house on the ground floor. It has good light and stays cool even on hot days." A young woman burst through the front door, all energy and wild dark curls barely contained under a kerchief. "You must be Eleanor and Rose. I am Lily. Oh, I am so glad you are here. Kade told me all about you and I am just thrilled to have other women in the house." Not that Kade is bad company, but he is so serious all the time and never wants to talk about anything interesting. "I am standing right here," Kade said dryly, but his eyes were fond as he looked at his sister. Lily laughed and took Rose's other arm. "Come on, let me show you to your room. We have it all ready for you, fresh linens and everything. Eleanor, your room is upstairs next to mine. Kade took the room at the far end so we can stay up gossiping without bothering him." As they entered the house, Eleanor looked around with wide eyes. The interior was even more impressive than the exterior. Polished wood floors gleamed beneath woven rugs. Comfortable furniture filled a large sitting room. The dining room table could seat a dozen people easily. The kitchen, visible through an open doorway, was huge and well equipped with a modern cast iron stove and a pump right at the sink. "Your father built a good house," Eleanor said to Kade. "My grandfather, actually. He was one of the first ranchers in this valley. My father inherited it, and my brother and I inherited it from him. My brother moved to San Francisco years ago. Hates ranch life, so it is just Lily and me now, keeping the place running." They settled Rose into her room, which was indeed perfect, spacious and airy with windows that looked out over a garden gone slightly wild. Within minutes, Lily had Rose tucked into a real bed with a thick mattress and clean white sheets. Rose looked so small and pale against all that whiteness that Eleanor's throat tightened. Kade appeared in the doorway. "Doc Matthews will be by tomorrow. I sent word to him this morning. He will take good care of your sister, Miss Eleanor. Please, Eleanor said. Just Eleanor is fine. And I cannot thank you enough for this, for all of this. Well, you can thank me by whipping this household into shape. We have been living like a bunch of bachelors for too long. Lily does her best, but her heart is not in it. She would rather be breaking horses. Lily grinned, unrepentant. Because breaking horses is much more interesting than washing dishes. Cannot argue with that, Kade admitted. Eleanor, why do not I show you around? Lily can stay with Rose. Eleanor followed Kade back through the house as he pointed out various rooms and explained the household routines, or lack thereof, as became increasingly clear. The men basically cooked for themselves, doing a poor job of it. Supplies were ordered haphazardly. The house was clean enough but lacked any real organization or comfort. How many people live here? Eleanor asked. Depends on the season. Right now, we have got 12 hands staying in the bunkhouse, plus Lily and me in the main house, and now you and Rose. During roundup and branding, we bring in extra help, sometimes as many as 25 men. And you feed them all, we try. Usually the result is a lot of beans and burnt biscuits. Kade looked slightly embarrassed. I can handle cattle and horses and business just fine, but I am the first to admit domestic matters are not my strength. Eleanor surveyed the kitchen with a more critical eye. It had good bones, excellent equipment. It just needed someone who knew what they were doing. I can work with this, but I will need a budget for supplies and the authority to order what is needed. You will have both. Just keep records so I can track expenses. I am not worried about you cheating me. Kade leaned against the counter, arms crossed over his broad chest. I am more worried about you working yourself to death. This is a big job, Eleanor. Do not be afraid to ask for help or tell me if it is too much. Eleanor met his eyes. I am not afraid of hard work, Mr. Lancaster. I am only afraid of not having work at all. Something shifted in his expression, a deepening of respect mixed with what might have been admiration. I believe you, and please call me Kade. We are not formal around here. Then you should call me Eleanor, not Miss Eleanor. Eleanor. He said her name slowly as if tasting it. Pretty name. Suits you. Heat crept into her cheeks and she turned away to hide it, busying herself with examining the pantry. It was disorganized chaos, supplies shoved in wherever they fit. She could already see a dozen ways to improve things. I should start taking inventory, she said, and planning meals for the week. What time do the men eat? Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 7. Plus they are always hungry for something in between if it is available. Fair warning, cowboys eat a lot, a whole lot. Eleanor nodded, her mind already working through calculations and menus. This was something she knew how to do, something she could control. After months of helplessness, the prospect of honest work with clear expectations felt like a blessing. She spent the rest of that first day getting organized. She took inventory of the pantry and cellar, noting what they had plenty of and what they needed. She explored the kitchen thoroughly, familiarizing herself with every pot, pan, and utensil. She made lists, planned menus, and calculated quantities. When the men came in for supper that evening, she served them stew made from yesterday's leftover beef, but with fresh biscuits she had whipped up, and a dried apple pie she found the ingredients for. The cowboys ate with focused intensity, and several asked for seconds and thirds. Tommy, the young man who had driven them from town, complimented her biscuits so enthusiastically that his friends teased him about trying to court the new housekeeper. He turned red and stammered denials, but his eyes were friendly when he looked at Eleanor. Kade ate at the head of the table, saying little but watching everything. His eyes tracked Eleanor as she moved around the table, refilling coffee cups and bringing out more food. When their eyes met, He nodded approvingly, and that small gesture of recognition warmed her more than it should have. After the meal, several men offered to help clean up, which surprised Eleanor. Back in town, men would not have dreamed of doing women's work, but ranch life seemed to operate under different rules. She accepted their help gratefully, and soon the kitchen was clean and ready for breakfast. She checked on Rose, who had slept most of the day and was looking more rested than she had in weeks. Lily sat with her, reading aloud from a dime novel with dramatic flair that made Rose smile. Eleanor felt her chest ease at the sound of her sister's laughter. That night, in her own room upstairs, Eleanor undressed slowly and climbed into the softest bed she had slept in since their parents died. Clean sheets, a real pillow, a window that let in cool night air scented with grass and distant cattle. She lay awake for a long time, hardly able to believe the change in their circumstances. 24 hours ago, she had been desperate and terrified. Now she had a job, a home, hope for Rose's recovery, and a future that extended beyond next week's survival. She thought about Kade Lancaster, the way he had bought all her flowers without hesitation, the way he had offered her this opportunity, the way he looked at her like she was competent and capable rather than a burden or an object. She barely knew him, but something in her chest tightened when she pictured his serious face and rare smile. "Do not be foolish," she told herself firmly. "He is your employer. He was kind to you, but that does not mean anything beyond basic human decency. You are here to work, to take care of Rose, to build a better life. That is all." But as she drifted off to sleep, she could not help remembering the warmth of his fingers when he had pressed those coins into her palm, and the way his voice had softened when he looked at her crying. She had been alone for so long, carrying everything by herself. The idea of someone like Kade, solid and steady and strong, made her feel things she had thought she was too tired and too practical to feel. Morning came early. Eleanor woke before dawn, dressed quickly, and headed to the kitchen. She had promised a proper breakfast for hard-working men, and she intended to deliver. She got the stove fired up and started coffee, that essential fuel for anyone doing physical labor. Then she began preparing biscuits, scrambled eggs with peppers and onions, bacon, fried potatoes, and gravy. The men began filing in just before 6, scrubbed and hungry. Their eyes widened when they saw the spread Eleanor had laid out. Kade came in last, his hair still wet from washing, and stopped in the doorway. "This looks incredible," he said. "Sit and eat before it gets cold," Eleanor replied, pleased by the reaction but trying not to show it. The meal disappeared in what felt like minutes. Cowboys had been eating her plain food for years, but this was different. This was food made with care and skill, and they appreciated it with an intensity that made Eleanor feel valued in a way she had almost forgotten. After breakfast, Kade lingered while the others headed out to their various tasks. He poured himself another cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, watching Eleanor clean up. "You are going to spoil them," he said. "Good food makes for good work. Men who are well fed are happier and more productive." Cannot argue with that logic. He took a sip of his coffee. "Doc Matthews should be here around 10. I will stay close in case Rose needs anything." "You do not have to do that. I am sure you have work." "I do, but nothing that cannot wait. Besides, I want to talk to Doc about her condition myself. If she needs special medicine or care, I want to make sure we provide it." Eleanor's hand stilled in the dishwater. She turned to look at him directly. "Why are you being so kind to us? And please do not say it is just good business, because this goes beyond that." Kade was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes thoughtful. "My mother died when Lily was 12, he said finally. "Childbirth, a baby that came too early and did not survive. My father tried, but he was never the same after. He died 2 years later. Some people said it was his heart, but I think it was grief. I was 21, Lily was 14. We had this ranch and each other and not much else. We would have lost everything if people had not helped us. Neighbors brought food, taught me things about running cattle that my father had never gotten around to showing me, checked on Lily when I was out working from dawn to dark trying to hold it all together. He paused, his jaw working as if the memories still hurt. I swore if I ever got successful, if I ever had more than enough, I would help other people the way we were helped. So that is why. Because I remember what it feels like to be desperate and scared and not sure if you are going to make it. And because you remind me of myself back then. Proud, capable, willing to do anything to protect the people you love. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. Thank you for telling me, and thank you for giving us this chance. I will not waste it. I know you will not. He set down his coffee cup. I should get to work. Let me know if you need anything. He left, and Eleanor stood alone in the kitchen, her heart full of complicated feelings. Respect, gratitude, and beneath those something warmer and more dangerous. She forced herself to focus on her work. There would be time to sort through her feelings later. For now, she had a household to run. Doc Matthews arrived at 10 sharp, a distinguished man in his 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes. Kade brought him to Rose's room where Eleanor waited anxiously. The doctor examined Rose thoroughly, listening to her chest, checking her pulse and temperature, asking detailed questions about her symptoms and history. Finally, he sat back with a serious expression. Miss Rose has consumption, as I suspect you already know. It is advanced but not, I think, beyond help. With proper rest, good nutrition, and fresh air, many patients improve significantly. I have a tonic that will help with the cough and fever. She should spend time outside every day when the weather permits, but not to tire herself. And she needs to eat as much as she can manage. Will she recover? Eleanor asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I have seen worse cases improve dramatically. I cannot promise a complete cure, but with the right care, I believe Rose can live a long and relatively healthy life. The key is consistency. She needs months of careful treatment, not just a few weeks. Relief flooded through Eleanor so strongly her knees went weak. Kade's hand caught her elbow, steadying her, and she leaned into his strength for just a moment before catching herself and stepping back. Thank you, doctor, she managed. What do I owe you? The ranch has an account with me, Doc Matthews said. Mr. Lancaster and I will settle up at the end of the month. After the doctor left, Eleanor sat with Rose holding her sister's thin hand. You heard him, Rosie. You are going to get better, but you have to eat and rest and do everything he said. I will, Rose promised. Her eyes shone with tears and hope. Ellie, we are going to be all right. We really are. Yes, Eleanor agreed. We really are. The days fell into a rhythm. Eleanor woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands. After cleaning up, she would work on other meals, do laundry, keep the house clean, manage supplies. She made lists, kept careful accounts, and established routines that brought order to what had been domestic chaos. The men responded well, keeping the bunkhouse cleaner and showing up for meals on time. Lily helped when she felt like it, which was not often, but Eleanor did not mind. Lily was young and spirited, and her enthusiasm for horses and ranch work made her a good balance to Eleanor's domestic focus. Rose improved slowly but steadily. Color returned to her cheeks. The terrible cough lessened. She began spending time in the garden, pulling weeds and tending the neglected flowers with careful attention. Doc Matthews visited weekly and pronounced himself pleased with her progress. Eleanor saw Kade every day but rarely had extended conversations with him. He was always working, riding out before dawn to check on cattle, mending fences, managing the business side of ranching, meeting with buyers. But she felt his presence constantly. He would appear in the kitchen for a cup of coffee and stand quietly watching her work. He complimented meals, noticed when she made improvements to the house, and always asked after Rose's health. Sometimes Eleanor would look up from kneading bread or stirring a pot to find him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something warm and intent that made her pulse quicken. She would look away quickly, reminding herself of her place, but she felt his gaze like a physical touch. 3 weeks after Eleanor arrived at the Double L, a traveling preacher came through offering Sunday services. Kade gave the men the morning off, and most chose to attend. Eleanor dressed carefully in her best dress, a plain green calico that was still the nicest thing she owned. Rose wore her second best, now fitting better as she gained weight. They rode to town in the wagon with Lily and Kade. The service was held in the schoolhouse since Murphy's had no proper church. Eleanor found herself sitting beside Kade on a hard wooden bench, acutely aware of his presence. His shoulder brushed hers when he reached for a hymnal to share, and the brief contact sent electricity through her. Their voices blended in song, his deep bass and her clear alto, and something about that simple act of singing together felt intimate and right. After the service, people lingered to socialize. Several women approached Eleanor with curiosity and some with judgment in their eyes. She held her head high and answered their veiled questions with polite firmness. Yes, she worked at the Double L. Yes, her sister was much improved. No, she had no plans to look for work elsewhere. She was quite happy where she was. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house woman, pulled her aside with narrowed eyes. You want to be careful, girl. Living out at that ranch with all those men, people will talk. Eleanor felt anger flash hot in her chest. People will talk regardless of what I do, Mrs. Henderson. I would rather they talk about me working an honest job than about me and my sister starving in that room above the feed store. She walked away before the woman could respond, her hands shaking. Kade appeared at her elbow as if summoned. Everything all right? He asked quietly. Fine. Just small-minded people with small-minded concerns. His jaw tightened. If anyone gives you trouble, you tell me. I do not tolerate disrespect toward people under my protection. Your protection? Eleanor raised an eyebrow. You work for me. That makes you part of the Double L. We take care of our own. He said it simply, as if it were obvious, and Eleanor felt something warm unfold in her chest. They returned to the ranch in comfortable silence. Eleanor found herself studying Kade's profile as he drove the wagon, the strong lines of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with casual competence. He caught her looking and smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face, and Eleanor quickly looked away, heat rising in her cheeks. That evening, after supper had been served and cleaned up, Eleanor stepped out onto the front porch for some air. The summer night was warm but pleasant, crickets singing in the grass, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Kade emerging from the house. Mind some company? He asked. Not at all. He leaned against the porch railing beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the western sky. You have done a remarkable job here, Kade said eventually. The house runs smoother than it ever has. The men are happier. Even Lily seems more settled, having another woman around. Thank you, I enjoy the work. Do you miss town? Eleanor considered the question. No, there was nothing for me in Murphy's except hard memories and harder prospects. This feels more like home than anywhere has since my parents died. I am glad. He turned to look at her directly. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her heart began to pound. "Yes. When I saw you that day selling flowers, something in my chest just twisted. You looked so proud and so desperate all at once. I knew I had to help, but I also knew you would never accept charity. So I offered you a job, and I admit I might have exaggerated how much we needed the help." Eleanor felt a flash of hurt. "So you pitied me?" "No," he said it firmly. "I respected you. There is a difference. And Eleanor, we really did need someone to manage the house. I just might have been prepared to keep looking if I had not met you. But the minute I saw you standing there with your flowers and your dignity, I knew you were exactly who this place needed." "And now," Eleanor asked softly, "now I think this place needs you for a lot more reasons than housekeeping." His voice was rough with emotion. "Eleanor, I am not good with words. I am a rancher, not a poet, but I find myself looking for excuses to be near you. I make up reasons to come to the kitchen for coffee. I time my returns to the house to coincide with your movements. I think about you when I am out riding, wonder what you are doing, if you are happy, if you ever think about me." Eleanor's breath caught. "Kade, I know I am your employer, and that puts you in an awkward position. If my feelings make you uncomfortable, we will never speak of it again and nothing will change. You and Rose will always have a home here regardless. But I could not keep quiet any longer. Not when every day I am falling more in love with you." Eleanor stared at him, her heart racing. 1,000 thoughts crowded her mind. The impropriety of it, the risk to her position, what people would say. But beneath all those practical concerns was a truth she could no longer deny. She had been falling for Kade Lancaster since the moment he bought all her flowers with that gentle smile. She loved his strength and his kindness, his rare smiles and his quiet competence, the way he protected his people and worked harder than any of his men. "I think about you too," she admitted quietly. "I tell myself I should not, that it is foolish and risky, but I do. I watch for you during the day, listen for your voice, find excuses to be where you might be." Kade's expression transformed with hope. "Eleanor, may I court you? Properly, respectfully, I want to do this right." "Yes." The word came out before she could second-guess herself. "Yes, you may court me." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against hers, his grip gentle but sure. They stood there on the porch holding hands as stars filled the sky above them. And Eleanor felt happiness bloom in her chest like the wildflowers she had picked that fateful morning. Courting on a working ranch was necessarily different from courting in town. There were no formal calls or chaperones, no proper parlor visits. Instead, Kade and Eleanor found moments throughout their days. He would help her carry heavy supplies from the cellar. She would bring him coffee when he worked late in his office going over accounts. They took evening walks around the ranch, talking about everything and nothing. Lily and Rose became their sometimes chaperones, though both seemed more interested in encouraging the romance than preventing impropriety. Kade told Eleanor about his childhood, growing up on the ranch, learning cattle and horses from his father. He spoke about his mother, a gentle woman who loved music and could grow anything in her garden. He described the dark years after his parents died, when he worked himself nearly to death trying to save the ranch while raising a grieving teenage sister. He talked about his dreams for the Double L, plans to expand into new breeds of cattle, to improve his land through careful management. Eleanor shared her own history. Her father had been a bank clerk, her mother a teacher. They had been comfortable, not wealthy but secure, until cholera swept through Murphy's. Both parents gone within a week, leaving Eleanor and Rose alone. The slow slide into poverty as Eleanor tried and failed to find steady work. The constant fear and hunger, the weight of responsibility for Rose's life and health. "You are the strongest person I have ever met," Kade said one evening as they walked along the creek. "What you survived, what you did to keep your sister alive. I admire you more than I can say." "I did not feel strong," Eleanor admitted. "I felt terrified all the time. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is doing what needs to be done despite the fear." He stopped walking and turned to face her. "Eleanor, I am falling more in love with you every day. Your strength, your compassion, the way you have made my house a home. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, feeling the rasp of stubble beneath her fingertips. "I love you too. I tried not to. I told myself it was impossible, that I was being foolish, but I cannot help it. You are the best man I have ever known." Kade pulled her into his arms, and Eleanor went willingly, resting her head against his broad chest and feeling his heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear. They stood there in the fading light, holding each other, and Eleanor felt a peace she had not known since before her parents died. He kissed her for the first time that night, gentle and sweet beneath the stars. Eleanor melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck as the kiss deepened. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, and Kade rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he whispered. "I know it is fast, but I am certain. You are meant to be mine, and I am meant to be yours. Marry me, Eleanor." "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." They told Rose and Lily that same night. Rose cried happy tears and hugged them both. Lily whooped with joy and insisted they celebrate with the bottle of whiskey their father had been saving. They toasted with small glasses, laughing at Lily's exaggerated disgust at the taste. The next day, Kade gathered his ranch hands and made the announcement. The men cheered and congratulated them with genuine warmth. Tommy, the young cowboy who had first driven Eleanor to the ranch, grinned widely. "I had a feeling from the first day," he said. "The way the boss looked at you, I knew he was done for." "That obvious?" Kade asked, but he was smiling. "Only to anyone with eyes, boss." They decided on a simple wedding, just family and the ranch hands, with the traveling preacher officiating when he returned to the area in 2 weeks. Eleanor had no wedding dress and no money for one, but Lily insisted on taking her to town to the dressmaker. "Kade gave me money specifically for this," Lily said firmly when Eleanor protested. "He wants you to have a proper dress." The dressmaker, Mrs. Chen, was a Chinese woman who had faced her own share of prejudice in the gold rush town, but had built a reputation for beautiful work. She listened to what Eleanor wanted and promised to create something special. Over the next week, Eleanor went for fittings, watching as the dress took shape. Simple but elegant, white cotton with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, fitted at the waist and flowing to the floor. It was the most beautiful thing Eleanor had ever owned. The wedding day dawned clear and warm. Eleanor dressed with Rose and Lily's help, her hands shaking as she buttoned the dress. Rose had woven wildflowers into a crown for her hair, the same California poppies and lupines Eleanor had sold that first day. "You look beautiful," Rose said, tears streaming down her face. "Mama and Papa would be so happy." Eleanor hugged her sister carefully, trying not to crush the flowers or wrinkle the dress. "I wish they could be here." "I think they are," Rose said softly, "watching over us, glad we are finally happy." The ceremony took place in the ranch house's large sitting room. The cowboys had helped move furniture to create space, and someone had brought in armfuls of wildflowers to decorate. Kade stood at the front with the preacher, wearing a new black suit that made him look devastatingly handsome. His eyes widened when Eleanor appeared in the doorway, and she saw love and wonder in his expression. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. Eleanor spoke her vows in a clear voice, promising to love and honor Kade for all her days. Cade's voice was rough with emotion as he made his own promises. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Kade kissed her with such tenderness that Eleanor felt tears slip down her cheeks. The celebration afterward was joyful and loud. The cowboys had pitched in to provide food and music. Someone had a fiddle, another a harmonica, and they played lively tunes that had everyone clapping and dancing. Eleanor danced with Kade, with Tommy, with all the ranch hands who wanted to congratulate her personally. Rose danced too, carefully but happily, her health improving enough to allow such exertion. As the sun set and the party began to wind down, Kade took Eleanor's hand and led her upstairs to the room that had been his alone but was now theirs. Someone, probably Lily, had decorated it with flowers and lit candles that cast a warm glow. Kade closed the door and turned to his wife with reverence in his eyes. "Eleanor Lancaster, you are my wife." "I am your wife," she agreed, and the words felt like magic. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, and Eleanor responded with all the love and passion she had been holding back. They undressed each other with gentle hands, learning each other's bodies with wonder and delight. Kade was tender and patient, making sure Eleanor felt nothing but pleasure. When they finally came together as husband and wife, Eleanor felt a completeness she had never imagined. This was home. This was love. This was everything. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the candlelight, Cade's fingers tracing lazy patterns on Eleanor's skin. "I love you," he murmured against her hair, "more than I knew it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Eleanor said. "You saved my life, Kade. You and Rose, you are my whole world." "You saved my life too," he replied. "I did not even realize how lonely I was until you came and filled all the empty spaces. This house is a home now. I am a better man because of you." They talked long into the night, making plans for their future. Kade wanted children, and Eleanor admitted she did too, though she wanted to wait until Rose was completely recovered. They talked about expanding the ranch, about building a school for the valley's children, about growing old together on this land they both loved. Eleanor fell asleep in her husband's arms, safe and loved and happier than she had ever dreamed possible. The girl who had stood on Main Street selling wildflowers out of desperation seemed like someone from another lifetime. She had been transformed, not by money or status, but by love and purpose and the steady strength of a good man who had seen her worth when she had almost forgotten it herself. The seasons turned. Summer faded into fall, and the ranch settled into the rhythms of harvest and preparation for winter. Eleanor managed the household with skill, but now she did it as mistress of the Double L rather than hired help. The men respected her authority, and she used it wisely, treating everyone with fairness while maintaining high standards. Rose continued to improve, her health stabilizing under Doc Matthews' care and the benefits of good food and clean air. She began helping more around the ranch, particularly in the neglected garden which she transformed with patient effort. Under her care, vegetables flourished and flowers bloomed in colorful profusion. She seemed to have inherited their mother's green thumb. Lily became like a sister to Eleanor, though she remained far more interested in outdoor work than domestic duties. She could rope a steer and break a horse with the best of the cowboys, and they respected her skill, even as they teased her about her tomboyish ways. Eleanor worried sometimes about Lily finding a husband who could appreciate her unconventional nature, but Lily laughed off such concerns. "I am only 19, Lily said. "Plenty of time for all that. Right now, I am learning everything I can about ranching. Someday I want my own spread, or maybe I will just stay here and help Kade build the biggest ranch in California." Winter came, cold and wet. The ranch work slowed but never stopped. Cattle still needed tending, horses still needed care. Eleanor kept the house warm and welcoming, cooking hearty meals that filled bellies and lifted spirits during the dark months. She and Kade grew closer still, learning each other's rhythms and moods, building the foundation of a strong marriage. On Christmas Day, the whole ranch gathered for a feast. Eleanor had been cooking for days, preparing a turkey, ham, potatoes, vegetables, pies, and cakes. The dining room table groaned under the weight of food. They said grace together, and Eleanor felt overwhelming gratitude for how her life had changed. 1 year ago, she and Rose had been cold and hungry, facing another bleak Christmas alone. Now they were surrounded by friends and family, warm and fed and loved. After dinner, Kade pulled Eleanor aside with a small wrapped package. "I know we said we would not exchange gifts," he said, "but I could not resist." Eleanor opened the package to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Inside were 2 tiny photographs, one of her parents and one of Kade. Tears filled her eyes at the thoughtfulness of it. "How did you find a photograph of my parents?" she asked. "I went to everyone in town who might have known them. Finally found one at the schoolhouse." "Your mother was a teacher there, remember? They had a photograph from a faculty gathering." Eleanor threw her arms around his neck, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. "Thank you. This is the most precious gift I have ever received." "You are the most precious gift I have ever received," Kade replied, holding her close. "Every day with you is a gift." Winter passed into spring, and with the warmer weather came the busiest time of year on a cattle ranch. Calving season meant long hours for everyone, checking on pregnant cows, helping with difficult births, ensuring the new calves survived and thrived. Eleanor saw less of Kade during this time, but she understood. The ranch was not just their livelihood, it was their legacy and their future. One evening in April, Kade came in exhausted and covered in mud. Eleanor heated water for him to wash and made him sit while she served his dinner. He ate mechanically, clearly too tired to taste the food. When he finished, he pushed back from the table with a weary sigh. "We lost 2 calves today," he said. "Born too weak to survive, breaks my heart every time." Eleanor moved behind him and began massaging his shoulders, working out the knots of tension. "You did everything you could, you always do. I know, does not make it easier." He reached up to cover one of her hands with his. "How was your day?" "Good. Rose and I planted the vegetable garden. Lily helped for about 10 minutes before she got bored and wandered off to the barn." Eleanor paused, then said carefully, "And I was sick this morning." Kade twisted to look up at her, sudden alertness driving away his exhaustion. "Sick? Should I get Doc Matthews?" "No." Eleanor smiled, joy bubbling up in her chest. "This is the good kind of sick, Kade, the kind that means we are going to have a baby." For a moment, Kade just stared at her. Then he was on his feet, lifting her into his arms and spinning her around with a whoop of joy that brought Lily and Rose running. "What happened? Is someone hurt?" Lily demanded. "No." Kade set Eleanor down but kept his arms around her, his face split by the widest smile Eleanor had ever seen from him. "Eleanor is expecting. We are going to have a baby." The squeals of delight from Lily and Rose probably scared the horses in the barn. They hugged and cried and talked over each other in excitement. Kade kept touching Eleanor's still flat stomach with wonder in his eyes, as if he could not quite believe it was real. That night in bed, he held her with exquisite gentleness. One large hand splayed protectively over her belly. "A baby," he murmured, "our baby. Eleanor, you have made me the happiest man alive." "I am happy too," she said, "and scared." "Is that normal?" "Probably." "I am scared too, scared something will go wrong, that I will not be a good father, that I will fail to protect this new life." He kissed her forehead. But I figure being scared means we care enough to try our best, and we will do this together. Together, Eleanor agreed and let herself relax into his embrace. Together, they could face anything. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Eleanor battled morning sickness that lasted well past the morning. Doc Matthews visited regularly and assured her everything was developing as it should. Kade became almost comically protective, trying to prevent her from lifting anything heavier than a spoon. Eleanor bore his hovering with patient amusement, though she put her foot down when he suggested she stop cooking. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she told him firmly. "I will rest when I need to rest and work when I am able. I will not spend 7 months being useless." "You could never be useless," Kade protested, but he backed off, though Eleanor often caught him watching her with anxious eyes. As her belly grew, Eleanor found herself daydreaming about the baby. Would it be a boy or a girl? Would they have Kade's dark eyes or her lighter ones? Would the child love ranch life or long for something different? She hoped for a healthy child above all else, but she admitted to herself that she would love to give Kade a son to teach ranching to, someone to carry on the Lancaster legacy. Rose thrived that summer, her health better than it had been in years. She had put on weight, lost the hollow look in her cheeks, and rarely coughed anymore. Doc Matthews pronounced himself amazed by her recovery. Eleanor knew it was the combination of good food, fresh air, and happiness that had saved her sister. Rose had hope now, a future to look forward to. That had made all the difference. In late summer, a neighboring rancher came calling with his son, a serious young man of 23 named Daniel Wright. Daniel seemed immediately smitten with Rose, and Rose blushed and smiled when he spoke to her. Eleanor watched their tentative courtship with approval. Daniel was respectful and kind, and his father owned a successful ranch about 10 miles east. It would be a good match if Rose's feelings continued to grow. "Is it strange to think of Rose married?" Eleanor asked Kade one night. "She is only 17. She seems so young." "She is young," Kade agreed, "but she has been through things that aged her beyond her years, same as you. If she loves Daniel and he treats her right, age does not matter much. My mother was 17 when she married my father." "How old was your father?" 20. They grew up together, knew each other their whole lives. Kade ran a hand over Eleanor's rounded belly. "This baby is kicking hard today. He or she has been active all evening." Eleanor placed her hand over Kade's. "I think we might have a wild one on our hands." "Takes after his or her mother then," Kade teased. "Remember when you stood on Main Street selling flowers with such dignity? I knew right then you were fierce." "I was desperate. Fierce and desperate, a dangerous combination." He kissed her soundly. "I am the luckiest man in California." Eleanor went into labor on a cool October evening. She had been feeling odd all day, restless and uncomfortable, and when the first pain hit, she knew immediately what it meant. Kade went white and immediately sent someone for Doc Matthews. Lily and Rose helped Eleanor to her room and stayed with her, offering encouragement and wiping her face with cool cloths. Labor was long and difficult. Eleanor labored through the night and into the next day, gritting her teeth against the pain and bearing down when Doc Matthews told her to push. She heard Kade pacing in the hallway, clearly tormented by her cries of pain, but kept away by the doctor who insisted this was women's work. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, the baby came in a rush of fluid and relief. Eleanor collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted beyond measure as the baby's first cries filled the room. "A boy," Doc Matthews announced, holding up the squalling infant. "A healthy, strong boy." Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as the doctor cleaned the baby and placed him in her arms. He was red-faced and furious at his expulsion from the womb, but to Eleanor, He was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair, and his father's strong features already visible in miniature. "Bring in Kade," Eleanor said. "Let him meet his son." Kade came in looking terrified. He approached the bed as if walking on sacred ground, his eyes fixed on the bundle in Eleanor's arms. When he looked down at his son, his expression transformed with such love and wonder that Eleanor fell in love with him all over again. "Our son," Kade whispered. He reached out a tentative finger and the baby grabbed it with surprising strength. "He is perfect, Eleanor, just perfect." "What should we name him?" Eleanor asked. They had discussed names extensively but never settled on one. Now, looking at their son, Eleanor knew exactly what felt right. "Keegan," she said. "Keegan James Lancaster." "Keegan," Kade repeated, testing the name. "After my father." "James was your father's name?" "Yes, Keegan James Lancaster." Kade bent to kiss Eleanor's forehead. "Perfect. You are perfect. Thank you for my son. Thank you for everything." Keegan proved to be a strong, healthy baby who ate well and slept in reasonable stretches. Kade was a devoted father, changing nappies without complaint and walking the floor with his son when the baby fussed at night. Eleanor had feared Kade would consider child care beneath him, but he threw himself into fatherhood with the same dedication he brought to everything. "This is my son," he said when Tommy teased him about it. "Why would not I take care of him?" Christmas that year was magical. Keegan was 2 months old, starting to smile and focus on faces. They gathered again for a feast, and Eleanor felt her heart swell with contentment as she looked around the table. Kade at the head with Keegan sleeping in his arms, Rose glowing with happiness as Daniel Wright sat beside her having been invited for the holiday, Lily laughing at one of the cowboys' jokes, Doc Matthews who had become almost family, and the ranch hands who were more than employees. This was her family now, cobbled together from unlikely pieces but strong and true. Rose and Daniel married in the spring, a joyful ceremony that left hardly a dry eye in the house. They would live on the Wright ranch, only a few hours' ride away, close enough to visit regularly. Eleanor cried as she watched her sister pledge her life to a good man who clearly adored her. Against all odds, both Voss sisters had found happiness and love. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work and joy. Keegan grew into a sturdy little boy who followed his father everywhere, wanting to help with ranch work from the time he could walk. When Keegan was 3, Eleanor gave birth to a daughter they named Me, a tiny, delicate girl who proved to have a spine of steel beneath her pretty exterior. 2 years later came another son, Thomas, who was quieter than his siblings but observant and clever. The ranch prospered under Kade's management and Eleanor's domestic oversight. They expanded their holdings, bought better breeding stock, and developed a reputation for quality cattle throughout California. Kade became a respected voice in the ranching community, known for fair dealing and innovative practices. Rose had 3 children with Daniel, and the cousins grew up riding back and forth between the 2 ranches, as comfortable on horseback as on foot. Lily eventually married a quiet rancher from Stockton named Samuel, who appreciated her unconventional ways and supported her dreams. They bought land north of the Double L, and Lily finally got the ranch she had always wanted. Eleanor stood on the porch one evening watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Keegan was 12 now, Me was 9, and Thomas was 7. They played in the yard under the watchful eye of one of the younger ranch hands. Kade came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How far we have come," Eleanor said. "I was standing in almost this exact spot 16 years ago, fresh arrived at the ranch and hardly daring to hope my life could change. And look at us now." I fell in love with you that first day, Kade admitted, when I saw you selling those flowers. I told myself I was just being kind, just offering a job to someone who needed it. But the truth is, I was already half in love with you. The way you held your head high despite everything. The way you looked at me like I was worth your respect. The way you clearly would have fought anyone who threatened your sister. I fell in love with you when you bought all my flowers, Eleanor replied. The kindness of it, the generosity. But more than that, the way you did it. You did not make me feel small or pitiful. You treated me like I was offering something valuable, like you were getting a good deal. You gave me dignity along with your money. Best $5 I ever spent. Kade kissed her neck. Look at everything I got out of it. A wife, 3 children, a properly run household, and happiness I did not even know I was missing. I got rather a lot out of it myself, Eleanor said dryly. A home, security, love, children, and a husband who still makes my heart race when he walks into a room. I do, Kade sounded pleased. You do. Even now, after all these years and 3 babies and life becoming so ordinary, when I see you riding in from the range or sitting at the head of the table or playing with our children, my heart still skips. Kade turned her in his arms and kissed her properly, deep and thorough. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. We should put the children to bed, he murmured. We should, Eleanor agreed, but she made no move to leave the circle of his arms. They stood there a while longer, watching their children play as the stars began to appear. Eleanor thought about the girl she had been, desperate and frightened, selling flowers in a last-ditch attempt to survive. That girl would never have believed this future was possible. But here she was, living it. Not just surviving but thriving, surrounded by love and family and purpose. I am grateful every single day, she said quietly. For you, for our life, for that morning when I picked wildflowers and you bought them all. I am grateful too, Kade replied. For your courage in trying to sell those flowers, for being brave enough to come to the ranch, for taking a chance on me. You transformed my life, Eleanor. You made it worth living. The children's laughter rang out in the gathering darkness, and Eleanor smiled. This was happiness. This was home. This was everything she had never dared dream of, given to her by a man who had seen her worth when she was at her lowest. The rancher who bought all her flowers and hired her, and in doing so, had given her the world. Years continued to pass in the steady rhythm of ranch life. Keegan grew into a fine young man who loved ranching as much as his father, learning everything Kade could teach him about cattle and horses and land management. Me surprised everyone by developing a head for numbers and a talent for business, taking over much of the ranch's accounting and financial planning by the time she was 16. Thomas, quieter than his siblings, showed a gift for working with animals, able to calm the most fractious horse or stubborn cow with patience and gentle handling. Rose's oldest daughter Mary spent summers at the Double L, and she and me became inseparable. They talked about starting a business together someday, though what kind changed weekly based on their current enthusiasms. Eleanor smiled at their dreams, remembering her own at that age, before life had shown her how hard the world could be. But these girls would not face what she had faced. They had family, education, opportunity. They could dream big because people who loved them would help make those dreams reality. When Keegan turned 18, Kade officially made him a partner in the ranch operations. Father and son worked side by side, and Eleanor watched with pride as her boy grew into a man who combined Kade's business sense with his own innovation and enthusiasm. Me, at 15, was already being consulted on major financial decisions, her insights sharp and valuable. Thomas, at 13, was still finding his way but showing promise in everything he touched. Lily and Samuel had two daughters who visited often, wild things who could rope and ride with the best of the cowboys. The Double L had become the center of an extended family that gathered regularly for holidays and celebrations, filling the house with noise and love and laughter. Doc Matthews retired and moved to San Francisco to live with his daughter, but not before training his replacement, a young doctor fresh from medical school in Boston who had come west seeking adventure. Rose's health remained good, the consumption held at bay by clean living and careful attention. She was a devoted mother and wife, and her friendship with Eleanor had only deepened over the years. On Eleanor's 40th birthday, the whole family gathered at the Double L for a celebration. The house was bursting with people, multiple generations filling every room. Eleanor stood in her kitchen, the heart of her home, and marveled at how different this day was from her 22nd birthday, which she had spent alone with Rose in their tiny room above the feed store, hungry and hopeless. Kade found her there, slipped his arms around her from behind. He was 44 now, gray threading through his dark hair and lines deepening around his eyes, but to Eleanor he was as handsome as ever. More so, because she knew him so deeply now, knew his kindness and strength and the gentle heart beneath his practical exterior. "You should not be working on your birthday," he chided. "We have people for that." "Old habits," Eleanor said. "I like being in my kitchen, it grounds me." 40 years old, Kade said. "Hard to believe you do not look a day over 30, Eleanor laughed. "Flatterer. We both know I have earned every line on my face, and they are all beautiful, earned through laughter and hard work and raising our children." He turned her to face him. "Eleanor Lancaster, you are the love of my life. Every year with you has been a gift. I cannot wait to see what the next 40 bring. Probably grandchildren," Eleanor said. "Keegan has been making eyes at the Harris girl from town. Mary Harris. She is a nice girl. Her father has that big mercantile. MMM. And me will probably marry some banker or businessman and terrify him with her competence. And Thomas will fall in love with some sweet girl who appreciates his gentle nature." Kade smiled. "We raised good children, Eleanor." "We did," she agreed and kissed him soundly. The party that night was joyful and loud. Someone produced a fiddle, another a guitar, and dancing broke out in the cleared sitting room. Eleanor danced with Kade, with her sons, with Daniel and Samuel, and a dozen ranch hands. She danced until her feet hurt and her sides ached from laughing. And all night, she felt Kade's eyes on her, warm and loving and constant. Late that night, after the guests had departed or been settled in spare rooms in the bunkhouse, Eleanor and Kade stood on their porch watching the stars. It had become their ritual over the years, these quiet moments together at day's end. "You ever think about that day I sold flowers?" Eleanor asked. "Wonder what would have happened if you had just ridden past?" "Never," Kade said firmly. "I could not have ridden past. You were meant to be mine and I was meant to be yours. If it had not been the flowers, it would have been something else. Fate would have found a way to bring us together." "You believe in fate." "I believe in you and me," Kade said. "I believe some things are meant to be. And Eleanor, loving you, building this life with you, that was always meant to be." Eleanor leaned against her husband, feeling his heart beat beneath her cheek. They stood there in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting. The ranch spread out around them, land they had worked and loved and would pass on to their children. Their family slept in rooms throughout the house, safe and loved and full of potential. Eleanor thought about the desperate young woman she had been, standing on Main Street with her tin cans full of wildflowers, praying someone would buy them. She thought about Kade riding up, seeing something in her worth saving, worth investing in. She thought about everything that had followed, the love and struggle and joy and growth. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" Kade asked. "For seeing me, for buying my flowers, for offering me a chance, for loving me, for all of it." "Thank you for taking that chance," Kade replied. "For being brave enough to come to the ranch, to let me court you, to build this life with me. For our children and our love and every moment of happiness you have given me." They stood together beneath the vast California sky, two people who had found salvation in each other. The Double L had become more than a ranch. It was a legacy of love, built from wildflowers and desperate courage, and the kindness of a man who had seen worth where others saw only poverty. And it would endure, passed down through generations yet to come, a testament to what could bloom from even the smallest seeds when they fell on fertile ground. Eleanor closed her eyes and breathed deep, smelling sage and cattle and the flowers Rose tended in the garden. She felt Kade's arms around her, solid and sure. She heard the distant lowing of cattle and the closer sounds of the house settling for the night. This was home. This was love. This was the life she had built from nothing, one flower at a time, and it was everything,